Hey ladies, listen up. We have a public service announcement here in the suite. To celebrate Women's History Month, Transamerica will donate $1 to Savvy Ladies for every social engagement during the month of March in support of their mission, empowering women to achieve financial independence. Simply tag Savvy Ladies, that's SAVVYLADIES, and use the hashtag Women Who Inspire. And in case you don't know about Savvy Ladies, they offer a 24-hour hotline to women in need of legal and financial advice, as well as resources and education for women who want to become financially independent. You can check them out at savvyladies.org. Thanks. Hi, this is Tina Powell, host of In the Suite, where I sit down with top women leaders and some of the biggest names in the financial services and the wealth management industry. Together, we'll discover some of their best secrets and top strategies to grow great business, build a strong brand, and lead teams in the 21st century. I hope you'll enjoy hearing their amazing personal stories of triumph, trepidation, and transformation in hopes of becoming better leaders ourselves. The time for you to lead is now, and you're in the suite. When it comes to leaps of faith, Devika Kamboh, founder and president of Sohum Global Foundation, knows when to pay attention to signs from the universe. In June of 2019, Devika literally bet the ranch on her own financial plan in what would be a profound and absolutely flawless move right before coronavirus pandemic. After 20 years of living in bustling New York City and working as a financial advisor, Devika doubled down on her own intentions and her own vision and purchased 117 acres in the Colorado Rockies and the majestic Sohum Mountain Ranch. Sohum in Sanskrit means to be one with the universe. As founder and managing partner of Sohum Financial Planning and a certified financial planner herself, Devika applied the Sohum principles for global well-being to empower her clients to create their roadmap to financial independence and their true life goals. Furthermore, Devika's clients were already well prepared for COVID with virtual meetings and technology. It seems that Devika's foresight in using remote platforms to continue advising clients and leaving New York City last year turned out to be the ultimate synchronicity in more ways than one. In July of 2019, Devika also created the Sohum Global Foundation. As a committed supporter of all efforts focused on nature conservation and those fostering safe environments for children and women at risk, Devika's foundation is teaching other nonprofits to collaborate and pool limited resources. Putting people on a path to mental and financial stability is a core principle of the foundation, and it would be put to the test during the pandemic. Like the sounds of the Navajo River at Sohum Mountain Ranch, Devika could once again hear the calling of the universe. She helped start the Digital Inclusion Project to benefit Lady Shri Ram College in New Delhi, where she earned a BS in economics. Later, she would go on to earn an MBA from Strathclyde Business School in Glasgow, Scotland. She speaks 3 fluent languages, English, Hindi, and Punjabi. Devika found herself at the center of the Digital Inclusion Project, which was formed after the tragic suicide of a student because she did not have a laptop and want to put strain on her family. In New Delhi, students without access to computers and online access are in danger of losing their coveted seats in college. Devika, assisted by a network of volunteers, worked at record pace to deliver over 100 laptops across the country in order to prevent another tragedy. One of the many gifts that you'll discover about Devika Kamboh in this episode is her ability to manifest a better life through environment. From her experiences at MetLife to Greenpoint Financial, to those at Sohum Mountain Ranch and empowering vets and other special needs groups to embrace YAY, a unique combination of healing that uses the principles of yoga, equine therapy, and Ayurveda, to Digital Inclusion Project of the Sohum Global Foundation. Devika is a living example of practice what you preach. I encourage you to listen to this entire episode to the end and put it on repeat, especially if you're feeling stuck or trapped by your environment, whether or not that be a bad situation at work or at home. And ladies who need a little help from the universe, let Devika Kamboh be your spiritual guide in the suite. Devika Kamboh, wow, take a seat in the suite. It's great to have you. Happy New Year. I hope you had a great holiday and a great New Year. How are you doing today?
I am actually fully energized on this ranch at the Sohum Mountain Ranch here in southern Colorado. And the year had a little bit of a topsy-turvy start due to our general politics, but nothing in my micro world over here. A lot to give thanks for. And ready to tackle 2021 full on.
You and me both, right? It's a change of energy. It's a change of the world. And so what a great time to be able to speak to you. And it was one of the reasons that I invited you here in the suite, Devika, because we are starting a new year. You have an incredible personal journey and what you've been able to manifest in your life 2 years ago when we first met. And then on top of this, coronavirus, I want to start out with just using your words on LinkedIn, which couldn't be more eloquent. So here it is, and I quote, transitioned my offices from Park Avenue in New York City to Park Avenue in Pagosa Springs, Colorado. It seems that my foresight in using remote platforms to continue advising clients on the East Coast and other US states and leaving New York City last year turned out to be valuable this year in light of the COVID-19 challenge. So let's start there, Devika. Your timing was absolutely flawless.
So, as you know, I've been in the industry for about 20 years and lived pretty much the entire time in New York City, right near the United Nations. So it's a pretty action-packed area, very dense in population, very dynamic group of businesses, and just the typical New York City vibe of 24/7 activity, And I made a decision a few years ago, actually, to execute my own financial plan. And the plan was to be where my heart is, which is in the mountains, in nature, and just kind of recharge my batteries. And the more I studied these old sciences, as I call them, and these old principles of being in touch with nature and understanding your inner journey, the more I understood the context in which my practice has to, evolve, for lack of a better word. And I decided that the best way to do that is to create the change instead of resisting it. So I executed my financial plan. It came together literally in the nth minute. And I purchased a ranch, which I never thought I would find, right here in southern Colorado. And in June 2019, I was the proud owner of what I today have named the Sohum Mountain Ranch. And I went about it in a very, very deliberate manner because the whole purpose of this journey and evolution is to not do things on autopilot or habitually, but to understand why you are gravitating in a certain direction and how your previous set of experiences are helping you build upon this and continue that progression. Because if you are of a mindset that is complacent or says, I've done this, been there, done that, I know everything, that is the point where your growth stops and you start stagnating. And so you have to constantly envisage how much more you can give back, how much more you can learn. And if your if your basic outlook in your mind is to learn and understand how much you don't know, that automatically will send guides along your way. And that's pretty much what happened with me. Once I set my intention to the universe that this is what I want to accomplish and this is what my vision is, and I projected it out sincerely, it started manifesting. because I didn't look right. I didn't look left. I didn't let the noise and the naysayers around me distract me. I kept to my focus. And here I am 2 years later, executing the next leg of that vision.
What's so profound about that is that you executed your financial plan and then COVID set in. So when did you set this intention? Like, how far back? You've been at the ranch for now almost 2 years.
It didn't happen overnight. Like, it wasn't like a sudden thing that, okay, I need to change course. I think all through my life, I have been groomed to eventually come in this direction without realizing it. I come from India, from a very, very privileged family, had a brilliant, upbringing, for lack of a better word. And my mother and my father and my entire extended family of type A uncles and aunts. And when I say type A, they are type A. They're not like the New York version of a type A. They're the global version of a type A.
Wow.
So the grounding principles, the moral fabric, the just sheer dedication to purpose that they have instilled. And from a very young age, the importance of giving back, the importance of lifting up the masses has been inculcated, because pretty much every aunt or uncle in my family, it's a very close-knit family. It's like a typical Indian family with, where it takes a village to bring you up. I am the poster child of taking a village to be brought up, even at this young age that I'm at today.
Yeah, you are.
But literally, they have been sounding... I joke about this with all my cousins. We have many moments of levity, and they're like, whenever they look at me, they're shaking their heads and they're like, child, you're like, when are you going to grow? So I said, you can't really say that you will grow, because you have to, ironically, stay in touch with your inner child, because it's your inner child that keeps you curious, keeps you vivacious, gives you joy in every moment in your life. And when you become too jaded or too cynical, or what in your definition is being sophisticated and worldly, you have basically lost touch with your inner child. And if you've lost touch with your inner child, it'll take a lot to bring you happiness and joy, despite all the material, accumulations and acquisitions that you can think upon from a social standpoint. So for me, they have my family has been my sounding board all my life. I've had great cousins who are mentors. They are brilliant financial minds. I have aunts and uncles who have done a lot in the social field. And, so when you have such strong role models, it's very difficult to deviate, which is a good thing, because I have a very strong personality. And, for the longest time, I was dubbed as the loose cannon of my family, because they would never know what would come out of my mouth, and I would shock them, because I was a rebel even when I was a kid, because if you just gave me the rules and said, follow the rules without giving me the logical progression, I would question everything. And because I would question everything, which was my way of learning, they would get uncomfortable. So I would also, poke them out of their comfort zones. And fast forward to my professional, career as a financial planner, and how I gravitated towards this profession. I actually came into this profession kicking and screaming, believe it or not, just like I came into this world kicking and screaming. So and so it was hysterical. I had such amazing mentors. I was in this bank program for management graduates. And today it's known as the Capital One Bank, but at that point it was Greenpoint Financial. And I had just finished my MBA in 98, and I'd just come over from Glasgow, and my European sensibilities, funnily enough, were really, really hurt when I came to the US, because everything was so crass and loud. But people in Europe in the 80s used to think that, okay, this is the new world, you're going to have fun in New York. Mm-hmm. So I came with these high expectations of culture and dynamic environments. And I got a culture shock, because I was coming with a very urbane and cultured mindset. And here it was literally like the wild, wild west in many ways, whether it was in the thought process, whether it was the way people conducted themselves, or just the sheer myopic behavior, because Americans in the US would think that America begins and ends with USA. They would know very little outside of their own. And, it was like a village, but the village was called USA. And people even in New York City who you would think would be exposed to international populations, given how cosmopolitan it was supposed to be, were really almost living in a vacuum. So when I came, when I decided to stay in New York City, it was a comedy show in a way, because I am watching all these people and all these people are watching me as if what has landed on this planet. And I'm like, okay. And then I have my family cheering me on and saying, listen, if you can survive our family, New York City is going to be a piece of cake, which it was, because the common goal that people in New York City had was, let's make money. And that was the common uniting factor. And I was like, wow, if it was only about making money, anybody can do it, which is what was basically happening. It's an equal platform, equal opportunity, should you be enterprising enough. So having survived that for 20 years, I realized that I need to bring balance not only to my clients' lifestyles, but also to move them away from this, unilateral focus on money. Because people more often than not forget that it's a means, it's not the end. And the moment you pause for a second and understand that it's a flow of energy, and so it should not stay stagnant, it needs to carry from your hand to another hand, whether it is in terms of charitable giving or whether it's in terms of buying something from a small business owner. Your money has to flow. If you just accumulate, collect, and hoard, it's going to create negative rates of return instead of positive rates of return. And so when you start thinking a little bit more in a community sense, in a global sense, your behavior patterns, your sensitivity to your environment automatically shifts. And that is what basically happened with me. It took a journey, because I would not undo what I did in New York City, because they all fed into my experience pool and basically enabled me to do what I'm doing today, whether it was the hard experiences or whether it was the positive, kudos, they all amalgamated to create the Devika that you see today, basically. And so when I decided to move in 2019, I decided that you don't have to be in a city to be productive, because I was watching myself for the previous 5 years. And I realized our profession, primarily all financial advisors, all financial planners, whatever you want to call yourself, on whatever style your practice adopts, you are technically working on your computers and on the phone. And you are probably meeting your clients a few times a year, even the most active, interactive people. Why can't that be done anywhere geographically? Why does it have to be finite? So if you want to go in a certain direction, why are you giving yourself unnecessary boundaries? And so that was one of the decision factors to help me move.
So a couple of things. Let's start first with that kind of that early career and that whole necessary, that kicking and screaming philosophy. But yet, you came from, you spent many years at MetLife and MetLife Securities. You have a CFP. You also started Kamboh Financial Planning. So what then? How do you go from kicking and screaming to, okay, yeah, sign me up for that CFP thing. I'll take that exam. And then, oh, by the way, let me, start my own financial planning practice.
So basically what happened is when I was working as a management associate, fresh out of business school in what was then called Greenpoint Bank, that then became North Fork Bank, that is today Capital One. At that time, if you remember, you had just had the breakup of Chemical Bank into what is today Chase. And a lot of these guys from Chemical and Chase Bank's merger, who were not given positions in an officer role, landed up leading this bank at that time. It was tiny and it was called Greenpoint Financial. So I landed up having two different mentors who were these ex-Barclays guys, actually, with very deep wisdom about the financial industry. So they understood that I was a very fast learner, and I was a quote unquote kid who needed to not have brakes on me. And the banking world moved very slowly and was very bureaucratic. So it was my mentors who forced me, and that is where the kicking and screaming part came in, because I thought, I have finished my MBA degree. I am the it factor. You don't make me do any more studying. And I am basically your gift to the world. I literally came with that typical, grad mentality. And I was such a crazy person. It's hysterical. And here I had this Southern gentleman from Tennessee who was so soft spoken to my loud, personality in general. And he's like, Devika, here is your Series 7 books, and you are going to go and study for your Series 7. So after my hullabaloo and what have you, he would always take me for these lunches. And I knew every time there's a lunch with wine involved, there is going to be some serious advice being given. And so he would put this Chardonnay in front of me, and then he'll be like, Devika, this is what you'll be doing next. So, and funnily enough, he was one of the few people I responded to. And it was hysterical how he crossed my path at that point in time. When we talk about being guided in your careers and teachers or gurus or who have you pointing you in the right direction, these guys took a firm handle of the situation and understood that I needed challenges mentally. And if something was too easy, they would give me a project. I would finish it super fast, and I would also finish everybody else's work around me. And I would be like, okay, what's next? So I was pretty much picking up the whole group with me, and so they were like, okay, she needs to be guided with a firmer hand. And, at that time, the banking world did not understand insurance and investments. They were just beginning to look at distribution of financial products through the banking channel. So I was literally at the cusp of the development of all this stuff. And it was Greenpoint Financial that started this in their backyard, literally before the Chases, the Citibanks, and the Merrill Lynches of the world started doing it in the banking format. So I learned firsthand. Once I passed my Series 7, I didn't realize that I had a natural aptitude because I was very result oriented. And it was amazing how well they read me as true mentors. And they were genuinely looking out for my positive development because I didn't know what I didn't know. I was like, just had to get out of my own way. And it was them who then helped me interview with the Smith Barneys, the Merrill Lynches of the world to decide and pick the right company that would be a good fit for me. And that's how I entered into the world of, financial advice, etc. And I never looked back because they were the ones who said, you need to do your certified financial planner designation. And I was like, what? I didn't even know what that was because I'd come in from Europe and, that was not a very well-known designation at that time. But these guys had pictured out the entire roadmap for me. And I kept resisting, and they were like, Devika, just hang in and just do it. And it was literally like they connected me with something I had a natural aptitude for. And I loved it because I loved interacting with people. That was my marketing background. I loved complex issues. And so it gave me the right combination of the challenge of acquiring your first group of clients, applying your brain because of all the financial concepts. But at the same time, I was actually able to see in real time how my advice was making a difference in a positive manner or in a concrete manner in the lives of the people that I was advising. So that was very, very important to me, and hence embarked the journey.
And there's a saying that the teacher shows up when the student is ready, which I love.
That is true. I literally, I am an example, and I don't want to repeat the word poster child, but when I first started the conversation with you, I told you, once you set your intention, the guides will cross your path. And it was amazing how different people crossed my path in my early, days in the career. I joined what was then the Financial Planning Association of New York. I then started, then I was within 2 years made the director of the pro bono committee, and I joined their board as the youngest and only Indian person. And they had very few women in the industry, if you remember. And so in a way, I learned stuff firsthand, both as a woman, as a person of minority, background. And I also witnessed all the inbuilt biases and unconscious behavior, which has today led to your Me Too movements and all this stuff that we look at. And fast forward 20 years, people are still having the old conversation of, hey, why are there not more women in this industry? But their behavior patterns towards women haven't changed. But yet they want more women to be in this industry. And ironically, just like golf, this industry, just like the sport of golf, is actually more suited to women than men But because of the way it's marketed, women get more hurdles than encouragement to join this industry. So it's very interesting to observe.
Well, and it's one of the reasons for the podcast is to help women and diversify the entire industry and to tell stories right now that have never been told, because this is one of your first podcasts I know that we talked about, and you are an example of several women that we brought here in the suite that have been in the industry for 20 years. And your voice and your story isn't out there, I think, the way that it should. And so I'm really glad that someone like you had enough, well, you had enough courage. There's another word for it called chutzpah, and that is exactly. And the mentors in your life certainly played a key role, which is also too a common theme of women in financial services, that they've been mentored, they've been guided. There has been some sort of person in their life that has had an influence on them, not only coming into the industry, but more importantly, staying into the industry and staying when things got tough. So what is your, along the lines of women, right? We're both trying to improve representation for women, representation for women of color. I know that you've done some incredible work with the Financial Planning Association too. What would be your recommendation? Let's position it for the positive, right? Because both you and I are optimists. We look at the glass half full. Where are the positive things that are happening right now in 2020, and maybe particularly as a result of COVID for women in the industry?
I think women as a whole are either the biggest champions for each other, or they can be the biggest roadblocks for each other. And I've witnessed and experienced and been subjected to both. So, so to focusing on the positive stuff, let's take your example. I'm gonna put the spotlight on you for a second. You didn't have to do this podcast, for example. You didn't have to think about pulling women like myself into the limelight and sharing our stories, but you are being a positive source of empowerment. And that is why we want to work with you and continue that positive cycle so that we are learning from each other's example. And there are many women like yourself and like myself who, despite the odds and despite the setbacks and, despite the naysayers, are so committed to what we believe in that we are, despite the odds, creating that positive cycle. And that's all it takes. It takes the intent and then the courage, to your point, to be able to stand up for what you believe in and then make it happen. You can't just theoretically think about it, and at the first curveball you get, you hunker down and you disappear. That's not how this is done. And I think more women need to understand that and take courage. Like, I'll give you some names of women who I met a year and a half ago when Marie Swift did this session in Kansas at the university, and they had a thought leader summit when I'd connected you guys. And, I'm somebody who gives kudos where the kudos is deserved. And Marie Swift brought me to the platform despite knowing how everybody was trying to blackball me when I brought the entire New York chapter of the FBA down, when I put them under, I reported them to the Attorney General's office. And she said, Devika, yes, I'd heard some murmurs, but I've also heard good stuff about you. And so I still want you to come and talk. And she didn't have to, because everybody else, literally, all these people who were going to do interviews when I was the president, et cetera, they disappeared. So, you were able to see who is there and who's there superficially. And that was my learning lesson. But then here she was giving me a positive result and not letting these controversial events affect the journey that I'm on. And that platform, I met other dynamic women like Zanelia Harris, and I met some other women speakers. And it's amazing how all these women started crossing my path as a positive example, given the very negative experience I'd had in 2017, 2018 as a board member. And it was amazing because you scratch the surface and you have the discrimination right under the surface in a cosmopolitan city like New York City. But I never gave a public interview when that entire controversy was happening, because I didn't want to encourage all that nonsense. I had complete faith in who I am. I didn't care what people thought about me because I had a very strong sense of myself. And that came from my family upbringing, because that is the kind of challenges that your family gears you up for. because they teach you that it doesn't matter what other people think, as long as your intent is sincere, things will work out. All the women who are thinking about coming in this profession or thinking about starting their own businesses, do a SWOT analysis on yourself. I'm going to use an MBA term. I know it's an ancient term, but it basically means a self-evaluation along the lines of your personal strengths, your personal weaknesses, the opportunities that you think, given your personality, you can, take advantage of, and the technical barriers to your own progress or to people in your business practice, And it's a very, very old saying, but it ties into the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And what Maslow basically said in economics, and this is where my nerdy side comes out, is that you can't talk about your higher goals about, hey, world, taking over the world and starting a new order, if you can't make do with your basic needs of, clothing, protection, and ongoing self-giving, So if you take care of these three factors of food, clothing, and shelter, then only you can start thinking about your higher goals and giving back. And this ties into the level of pro bono work I used to do, which used to, you talk about getting grounded. So I was the director of the pro bono committee. And at one point we had 40 different nonprofits that we had put together, even before the mayor's office of consumer empowerment came in. I actually remember way back then sharing my list of nonprofits with them so that they could, kick off that program for consumer health. And, you would go into Samaritan Village or you would go into Sanctuary for Families, these nonprofits, and you're watching these people who are being helped living at $40 a week. I'm talking about more than 15 years ago, but it was literally, they were living on $40 a week. And your goal was, as a financial planner who's volunteering, to teach them how to make that $40 a week last as you are at the same time during your day job consulting with people making a few $100,000 a year or a few $1 million a year. So I came up with this simple thing that if you can handle the beer crowd, but this was not even the beer crowd, how difficult is it to handle the champagne crowd? Not really. Because the only difference between a person making less than $10,000 a year and a person making $10 million a year is not that their requirements are different, their options are different. And another analogy I used to use is, let's say you were an interior designer and you were brought to create space in a small Manhattan apartment versus a house in Long Island in New York City, right? Obviously, if you're able to create space for that person in a New York City small apartment, then going and creating space in a big house is not a problem. So these are I can give you 3 different examples and 3 different analogies. So if you wanted to stay grounded and you saw how these people were living and they were still being so optimistic and they came from, ruined credit histories, massive drug abuse, if you take the example of Samaritan Village, and yet they came to my classes with a massive smile on their face and they were like, hey, Dee, how's it going? Do you want to know? I improved my credit report today. And these were their little baby steps, to the next step. And the one thing I encouraged the social workers who were the point of contact was because, we started this program called Train the Trainers to scale these programs because obviously we didn't have as many volunteers to come in and do these individual sessions. And the intake person and the constant influencer in their lives would be the social worker. So we taught the social worker how to help these people with the credit repairs and how to use the power of the organization that they were a part of to help give them exceptions. And then the one thing I told all these social workers, because I was watching this happen in a repeat cycle, is to stop teaching these people to earn minimum wage. The general mindset across the country 20 years later is they're still teaching these people to earn a minimum wage and just get gainfully employed instead of looking at the conversation from a different standpoint, which is what I started doing. I said, instead of asking them, or teaching them A, B, and C, why don't you ask them what do they aspire to do? So if they want a certain bling bling in their life, or they want to go to the nail manicure, pedicure sessions 3 times a week and change their nails, right, or they want a really cool cell phone, or they really if they want lifestyle X, what do they need to earn to be able to earn that lifestyle X? And therefore, what courses should you be directing them towards instead of just teaching them to be, earning a minimum wage. That's not a quality of life. And so that is what you have to do. You have to be an outlier. You have to think outside of the typical boxes that people are conditioned to think in, and then have the courage to communicate your vision so that other people can benefit from it. You'll not always be successful, but that doesn't mean you don't try.
Hey, listeners, you can now text me at 201-581-3983 to join our community in the suite. After you do that, I'll be lifting you up, inspiring you, and supercharging your career with awesome quotes, resources, videos, and tips we learned from our great guests. It couldn't be any easier. Just text 201-581-3983. So I want to talk a little bit. First of all, you had mentioned two ladies' names that have already been in the suite and that are dear friends, and that is Marie Swift and Zenelia Harris. And so I think it's only interesting. I don't even know if you knew that, but it's interesting now how all of this like-mindedness is connecting all of us and how they have been models of inclusivity and being kind to one another and raising other women. So I want to acknowledge them for that. I also want to touch upon something, this whole idea of, giving back, understanding ourselves through that SWOT analysis, which is, by the way, brilliant, under the umbrella of just giving back, because whether or not that it's the ranch, Devika, or it's this digital inclusion project, or it's you helping your clients, which I want to learn a little bit more about as well. It's this idea of just giving back and attaching a new meaning and coming from a place of service. Let's go first to this digital inclusion project.
So I'll take a step back and give you a little bit of the connect the dots. So when I left New York in June of 2019, it was a 6-month transitionary process to just try to hook up with a different broker dealer. Given the circumstances in which I left that company, because it was a very toxic environment and very toxic for women in general. And so I realized that if you need to really fulfill your full vision and tap your potential, you need to change your environment. And sometimes it takes a little bit of, again, getting out of your comfort zones and having enough faith in yourself to take that leap and then allow the process to unfold. Because if you just have mind games with yourself and you discourage yourself before you even execute your vision, and you shut the door on yourself before somebody else shuts the door, then you just did yourself a disservice. And I'm going to give you a basketball analogy because I've been a basketball player all my life.
Really?
Since my school days. And I've been in sports all my life, so my competitive type A nature comes from that too, in case you hadn't already picked on it. so there's nothing passive about me. I'm totally like, I just call it out and I'm like, live with it, It's better than talking to somebody's back. So in basketball, our coaches used to always tell us, you lose 100% of the baskets you don't shoot.
Yep.
And I kid you not, like 20 years later, like I'm 45, turning 46. That thing keeps dribbling back into my life, using another basketball term. I see so many instances when I talk to women, when I'm encouraging women, it's like almost like I see their potential and they don't see their potential, but they literally talk themselves out of their own opportunities. And you don't need a naysayer or a person. They're like just conditioned so badly by their environment that they can't get out of their way, basically. And you see, when we were talking about mentoring, I have to point something out about my generation, which is also your generation, versus the current generation or the millennials or whatever other name you want to give that generation. In my generation, or at least for me, and I'm giving my example, when I was learning, I was sincerely learning. I had a very high level of respect for my mentors. It's one thing to be cheeky and joke with them, but I never, ever took my eye off the goal plan. And when they explained something to me, I trusted them enough. That is why I am where I am and having this conversation with you. Mm-hmm. I never disrespected my mentors. I never challenged my mentors in a disrespectful manner. And this again comes from a cultural viewpoint. You see this amongst the Native American population. You see it amongst the Asian population. And I'm overgeneralizing, but it's a cultural nuance. We are taught to respect our elders. And because we are taught to respect our elders, we go about learning in a very, very distinctly different manner than a typical Western kid would. Okay, now I have nephews and nieces, and I have these millennials in our families who've grown up in the US. But even with them, I see a cultural distinction between their peer group and them because they're brought up differently with certain principles, certain manners, certain etiquettes. And these things are being lost in the general society. The reason I'm deviating and mentioning this is because it has a direct cause and effect, on the way people conduct themselves and the economic cycles that they expose themselves to. And I watch this literally on almost like a loop. Every time I come across people from different cultures as clients, what I observe in one culture and mindset is very distinctly different from another culture and mindset. And I think that is the key where when we talk about people wanting to be mentored, when we talk about people changing careers and, taking a leap of faith and following their heart and their aptitudes, what they don't understand is when you want somebody to teach you, you don't disrespect them. And what I've watched time and again, every time I've tried to mentor people with good faith, is that they question the mentor and the mentor's intention. And it's not because they necessarily doubt the mentor. It's the life experiences that they've had where people have basically thrown them under the bus. And so they cannot, in true sincerity, understand that somebody is genuinely looking out for them. They genuinely don't. Despite all the signs you're giving them and your intention, they cannot get over their own mental and psychological hurdles. And I think that needs to be given some intention to when we're talking about training programs and stuff like that. So I just wanted to throw that out. So when I came here to connect the dots, I had to coach my clients on remote communications. What they didn't understand was that they were already doing remote communications with me, but they just had this little safety net in their psychological mindset that, okay, she's in Manhattan, I'm in Manhattan, we can communicate with each other and see each other. So I said, you have barely seen me 2 times this year. So if I move to Colorado, I'll probably still see you 2 times a year because I'll be making my trips, except that I am now teaching you to get out of your comfort zone. And, I was doing these WhatsApp calls with them because at that time, Zoom hadn't come into the picture. Right. You had your Cisco WebEx and you had a couple of these technologies, but they understood WhatsApp. I said, okay, let's WhatsApp chat, And so once they understood that the communication, the point of touch had not changed, I was like, I advised them to do the same. I said, if the only reason you're in New York City, and New York City is great, don't get me wrong, I've had a great time there. But if you don't like being in the actual environment of New York City and you want to be in upstate New York, or you want to be in California, or you want to be down south in Florida in a warmer temperature, what's the point of all these technological developments if you're going to still put yourself in a cage and not put yourself in the environment that makes you the most productive? And so that's when the aha moment started happening. Because I got grief. I kid you not. I got a ton of grief from my social network, my family, my friends, and my clients that, Devika, we're giving you 1 year and then we expect you back in New York City after you've worked out your funk, quote unquote. And I was like, all right, game on. Let's see who's changing mindsets. So 2 years later, to your point, I was like, and here I am. Everybody's like, Devika, we love the pictures you're sharing about the ranch. Devika, where are you exactly? I said, well, I am in my little piece of heaven. And I didn't want to say I told you so, but I was like, now how do you feel about COVID when you're actually trapped in your apartments with all your money? Is your money going to give you the freedom of space? No. Some did. Some were able to buy houses. How many of you can just suddenly buy a house and just move out? You can't. You have certain golden handcuffs, as we call them. There is rent to be paid. There are bills to be paid. There are families to be taken care of. So now you are in COVID, and now you are understanding restrictions in the true sense of the term. And so now what I did looks like a genius move, right? And all I was doing was following my vision and following my heart. So that I wanted to connect those dots for you because that's where then digital inclusion came into play. Fast forward a year later, look at the way it crossed my path. So my alumni group is very dynamic. You know, some of your World Bank leaders have come from my college at Lady Shri Ram in Delhi. And I have, again, lucked out because I met some very progressive women in March of 2020, just before all the quarantining and everything started happening. I was actually able to go to India in my typical annual trip. And I reconnected with some very, very, enterprising alumni, women doing some really cool stuff. And I was very frustrated with my existing alumni network. And I couldn't understand why these women were not coming together to kind of, promote projects, help students in need and stuff like that. Fast forward in October, we found out that a young student had committed suicide because she didn't want to be a financial burden on her parents after all the hard work of getting into a college like LSR. It's like the equivalent of your Ivy League colleges over here. It shook us all up. And then what happened is that we didn't get the response we were looking for from the EC, which is our executive committee that coordinates all the alumni network. In front of my eyes, in late October into early November, this group of women just came together, including myself. We didn't even have a game plan. We literally just were started by sympathizing and, expressing our condolences. And then we were like, look, exams are around the corner. We are in an environment of COVID. All these students are in very remote areas, not all of them, but a big chunk of them who become hostelers when they come to become, besides the day scholars. But now in an environment of COVID, they've all gone back to these homes. Some of them are in villages. Some of them are in very remote areas. Some of them are in very politically sensitive areas like Kashmir. And then you have the logistical issues of COVID. So first goal was, how do we raise money and who do we mobilize? And then we had the issue of transparency, okay, we want to raise all this money. All these women in our networks want to help, but who's tracking the money? Because the big problem we had was transparency, and the college didn't have the wherewithal, given the standard of this college. We had some shocking discoveries. They didn't have bank accounts that could receive international donations. They didn't have the approvals. And so we literally had to work on the fly. And that's when I volunteered the Sohum Global Foundation to be, the platform where money can be raised for this digital inclusion project, as it came to be known. And we then selected another alumni. We were lucky to know Smita Premchandar, who founded the Sampark nonprofit in India. And they agreed to take money because eventually I would have to donate to a nonprofit in India too, because of my mandate as a 501c3 nonprofit. And we wanted to make sure there were very clear lines of donations and where the donations are getting dispersed for all the stakeholders involved. And then lo and behold, corporate India started coming in because of all the connections through FICCI. It's one of our industry organizations in India. And other private donors started coming in. And the next thing we know, between my efforts and the efforts of about 40 different women, just to brief, and students, we started creating a survey. And literally, this is all happening live on WhatsApp, believe it or not. 1 minute we have 5 women. The next minute we have 40 women and students, and they're all engaging. They're all excited. They're all being channeled in the right direction. And we have transparency so that those issues have been put to bed. And literally within 30 days, we identified the 125 students who needed aid. And the idea was to get them the service, first of all. So let's say you get a laptop to them. The next issue is network. What are they going to sign in on? So there were all these nuances, stuff that you take for granted here in the US that you don't even blink about. And so then we had women in technology jump in. So I have to give a shout out to Ayuki Moore. She's out of Paris. She mobilized her women across the globe. And we met the shortfalls. And in fact, we overshot our target. So now that excess money is going to be used to help the first year students who have just come into the first year of college. But we basically landed up helping about 98 to 125 women because there were 2 different groups involved in the fundraising. And they got their laptops within weeks of their exam starting in the first week of December. So literally in a 30-day period, women across the globe, alumni across the globe, people who didn't even know about the word digital inclusion suddenly started talking about digital inclusion and how this needs to grow. The government in India and certain bodies started getting engaged. And fast forward, we finally posted these videos that you saw on LinkedIn and on our websites. And then I decided that it was my learning curve, that it was not an India problem or our college problem. So other colleges started emulating what we were doing. And so the word is spreading. The right people are coming together. Companies like Microsoft and Google, et cetera, locally are trying to help by, providing the equipment. But then we came back to the US. So I started having a conversation with my two other board members for the Sohum Global Foundation. We were like, Devika, if you did this digital inclusion project all the way from here to India, why can't we help the local schools here? Because obviously this is not an isolated issue. There are at-risk students, like you hear about it in the news. You have students who are not getting their luncheons because they're not coming to school. So these students obviously are working remotely, and these are, again, disenfranchised groups of people who are not being looked at and they're being overlooked. And so why don't we try getting laptops by working with the local students and the local school bodies? So that's the next phase for me. I am trying to reach out to the principals, and we are trying to put some program in place where we'll start with Pagosa, and we'll see who wants to actually participate and have the intention and the leadership mindset, to actually help us with this, and then try to basically model this out so people can adopt it and then, start emulating it in different communities. So that's how digital inclusion came together. It's specifically digital inclusion for women. Just like we're talking about women not being represented enough in this industry, it's digital inclusion for women and then spreading it outward from an economic standpoint.
It's an incredible, incredible origin story of what can scale across where you are, the locality, as well as just what an incredible model for the world here. And I think that it was, unfortunately, I felt really, it's a horrible story of this young girl who didn't have the technology, didn't have the computer. And what you've done is you've now taken a problem that lots of young girls, not only in New Delhi, but also around the world as a result of COVID are experiencing. And there's probably other things beyond COVID that people have not had, women and students have not had the right technology, not the right network and infrastructure. And that is also partially related to even their own economic conditions. So that
because if you look at patriarchal, Tina, if you look at patriarchal societies, and if you have these really developed backward communities, even in the US, when we joke about trailer trash and we use these derogatory nuances, we're not understanding the economic plight of these people. They don't have to be in the developing world. They're right here in our backyards.
Exactly.
And if you have two kids, what we are witnessing is that the boy is given more amenities, even in the 21st century, and the girl will take a setback. And if you remember one of the articles I posted on LinkedIn just about a week ago, when they were talking about 140,000 jobs lost and entirely 100% were women, I am still processing that little piece of information about the level of discrimination still going on against women.
Well, there was a study that recently came out around, women specifically as it related to COVID and dropping out of the workforce. I think they estimated it, and we'll have a link into the show notes about all of these things, the Digital Inclusion Project. I'll definitely post your video. But the study estimated, I think it was 36%, let's just call it, of women who had to leave their jobs because they were the predominant caretakers at home. And so that definitely sets a lot of women back. But at the same time, their study did report that in some circumstances, there were more and more couples where they were sharing the work and where there's, some equality. So, I want to acknowledge our society that you and I both know, Devika, that we're not going to get to parity overnight. We're not going to get to it in our lifetime. But the way that a movement starts is through grassroots, through efforts like yours in the Digital Inclusion Project, through us here in the suite. And that is that we're taking a positive stance and we're creating action around our value system and what we believe and what we want to see in the world. And one of the things that you had mentioned before was this whole idea of environment and how an environment can literally keep a woman held hostage, whether or not that it's a work environment or it's a living situation or where they are geographically. I think you even use the analogy of a caged animal, and I absolutely think that it's some people right now feel very trapped. They feel like they're in a cage. They want to change their life, and they're listening to this podcast right now, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that sounds great. Let me just buy a ranch and move to a different part of the country." But what would be your advice, considering that, number one, you're a financial advisor, you work with people, you've been number two, a volunteer, a philanthropist, and you've worked with people, you've seen people through a global lens, and people, women especially, who are in less than good situations right now. Let's talk about, let's be you and I solution oriented right now here on that podcast and give that woman a way out. What would you say to her?
So the first thing I would tell all women, and it doesn't have to be limited to women, I will tell anybody who is not in their ideal environment. It could be a cage of money. It could be somebody who's affluent, who is mentally not where they want to be. And the cage can take whatever shape you want. It can be a money cage. It can be a relational cage. It can be a parent cage. Cages can take different forms for different people. It doesn't have to necessarily be economic. It can be psychological, mental, emotional, spiritual, or it could even be religious. You pick your cages and you go into your comfort zones. What I will tell you is, if you're not in your ideal environment, whether it's a domestic violence situation, whether it's an economic dependency situation, whether you're in an abusive home as a child, you always have options and you always have choices. You need to have the mental courage, and it's literally a mental courage because these are all mental roadblocks, to find help. And there are people who will help you, and find organizations who will support you. My organization is one of them. And I will take a little bit of a segue to come back to the messaging. So the Sohum Global Foundation is working with people on an individual level, not in a group cycle, where if you are a woman at risk or a youth at risk or a children subjected who are trying to get emancipated out of bad situations, you can reach out to organizations like ourselves. And technology is your best friend right now. All of you, even in your worst situations, have a cell phone, have a TV that you look at and see advertisements on. And if anything you have noticed, especially during this pandemic, there are helplines. There are a ton of helplines, whether it is, who's the Olympic swimmer? Tina, remind me, he keeps coming on TV.
Oh, yes, I know. With Michael Phelps. And he's promoting therapy,
Michael Phelps, thank you.
Mental wellness and
mental health. These are all online, and some of these are pro bono, because people are understanding the level of mental stress that the populations across the globe are dealing with. You don't have to find an expensive psychiatrist or a psychologist to get help. There are mental helplines. You just have to put in mental help on Google. Facebook, Google, all these social media platforms have taken some good work and are trying to facilitate access to help. There are 911. I'll forget about all these high level stuff that I'm talking about. You can dial 3 numbers, 911, and get help. Get out of the situation that you think you're stuck in, because you're not stuck in it physically, you're stuck in it mentally, and you are your biggest roadblock. If you can understand that one little principle and take a leap of faith, watch how your world changes. And I'm not talking just from my, head. I am a living example of practice what you preach. So there is nothing that I'm sharing with you that I haven't executed myself. So when you feel that all the doors are shut and you are in a very dark place psychologically, you step out of your house, go breathe in some fresh air, inhale and exhale 3 times consciously, and set out your intent and ask the universe for help. And if you genuinely want to get out of that situation, nothing can stop you. Wow. No hurdle you create in your mind will stop you. Wow. And if you can't understand that simple principle of being enabled by the universe, then I and Tina can spout really cool stuff for you guys, but you will not process it. It literally starts and ends with you individually. I am not somebody who's going to pull you out of your situation. You will pull yourself out of your situation. If you understand that little trigger, you will start acting on it immediately. It takes less than 30 seconds to do it.
So both you and I exercise without each other really knowing how each other is and what we do when we're not on the podcast together, and more specifically what we do before that, we're Tina Powell and Devika Kamboh, is that you and I both have a set of things that we do every morning. This morning I set out on a nature walk. Even though that I'm here in a suburb in New Jersey, I managed to see 2 deer. I see massive amounts of deer because I think that I'm a deer whisperer. The other day I saw 14 of them actually. And I take a nature walk. And so there's a set of practices, what I'm putting in my body, what I'm putting in my mind with a capital M here, and it's all linked. So I wanted to focus on one last question with you with regards to your time again, which we appreciated so much. If you can give us some final words about, improving, what would be the one behavior, one action, to your point, Devika, that you and I can't rescue people, right? We can give you the tools, but you're going to have to do the work. You've done the work, Devika. I've done the work. The work is really hard. The work is painful. The work puts you in touch with your mortality and the worst sides of yourself, and especially your ego. So when I say your ego, like my ego, we all have that. Exactly. Yeah. We all have that ego.
All of us have a shadow side, as we call it. And it's okay, because if you don't understand your shadow side, you can't appreciate the light. And you can, read a ton of books on philosophies where they'll, basically paraphrase this in different manners. But there is a reason we say a yin and a yang. There is a reason we say the masculine and the feminine. There is a reason we say light and darkness, or 2 sides of the same coin. We talk about love and hate. These are all balancing forces. You as a female, me as a female, or a counterpart who's a male, all of us have a masculine and a feminine side of our side. It's what we are channeling that defines our actions and the results around us. So if I'm using the example of Devika, and Devika has both masculine and feminine, but Devika is a type A person who's using her left brain more than her right brain. All that means is that I am being forced into a situation where I'm channeling my masculine side more than my feminine side. It doesn't mean I'm any less a female. It just means that I am adopting certain characteristic traits because the situation is requiring it. But when I'm talking about Sohum and the concept of balance and being one with the universe, the whole activity that we are in this earth to fulfill is to bring that balance in our lives. When we talk about rebirth in certain cultures, when we talk about, hey, why are some people so affluent and why are some people constantly going in through so much hardship? Why do we not catch a break? When we think about all these things, even with those people who are saying that they're not catching a break, if they would take a pause for 30 seconds and they would actually, in the journal example that you gave, write down all the positive stuff that are working for them and all the things that are not working for them, they'll realize that even when they're in their worst nightmare of a lifestyle, or they're in the worst challenges that they're facing, there is always a silver lining. They just have to be open to it, right? So when you talk about balance, so I'll use a recent example that happened to me. I got hit by a cow. I got hit by a 1,500-pound animal in the middle of herding them off my ranch on September 9th last year.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
I have no business to be alive.
I saw that. I saw
Yeah.
that you have a video on Facebook where you're actually.
Yes, but there's all this cattle.
Yes. Is that what you're referring to?
No, so that was a positive day, but on a
Okay.
different day, which was September 9th, 2020, I was herding somebody else's cattle trespassing on my property across the river on my property. And these were mother cows. They had been bugging me and challenging me and teaching me all at the same time, you know, on a daily basis, because they would come and move right outside my bedroom window just to let me know that they were on my property again. It's hysterical. So I am in the process of doing my typical herding them off my property. And 1 minute they are following my directive and actually crossing the river. And the next minute, a mother cow, who was the lead rogue cow, as I call her now,
Rogue cow.
she just made a 90-degree. Yeah, she was the rogue mother cow because I hate her guts, but I still respect her. But she pretty much killed me that day. And I technically should not be alive right now having this conversation with you, but that's for a different podcast, a different topic on spirituality and feminism, and, you know, giving me animal medicine as we talk in Native American stuff. But lo and behold, within 2 seconds, I was on my back, tripping over a log as this cow is hitting me again and again and again and trampling me. And the only reason I'm alive is because the log made me trip sideways, so she didn't get me full frontal. And then my cutie pie doggy, Sierra, who was trying to herd them off with me, basically, I think, chased her away from my body after she understood that she's attacking me. And so fast forward, when I surfaced, I thought I should be dead, but I could feel the pain in my body. So I'm like, great, so I'm still alive. So I guess I was not supposed to leave the planet on that particular day. And the first thing I do is I start cursing the damn cow. Okay. And I was like, out of all the people you could have found to trample on, you had to find mini me. And then you don't just hit me, you come back and she keeps whacking me with her head. Luckily, she didn't have horns.
Incredible.
And look at the irony of the situation. This is the one time that I was actually in full gear. So I was fully cushioned. And she only hit me in the parts where I was, you know, I had more fat, which is my butt and my thighs. And, you know,
Which you hardly
she didn't break a rib cage. She didn't hit my organs. I mean, I you know, and so fast forward, when I was talking to one of my spiritual advisors after I had stopped bitching and moaning about my experience and my self-pity. So the spiritual advisor heard me as my typical whining self. And then I come out of that mode, and then the spiritual advisor is like, Devika, okay, so you got hit by a cow. Yes, it was traumatic because you have loved cows all your life. I don't even eat beef. And you know, and so she goes, do you understand how much out of her comfort zone you put the cow? So much so that she came to charge at you, and then she didn't just stop charging you. She hit you after that just to whack some sense into you. And I said, this is not making me happy, what you're sharing with me. I am trying to focus on my life, you know, threatening experience, and you are defending the cow. And she's like, take a pause. She did the typical cycle, which is take a pause and think about what you did to that animal. How many times do you hear a cow in this world attacking somebody? So not only was she defending her young one, a cow is typically a symbol of abundance and feminine, you know, all feminine energy, divine feminine in India in many senses. And she is a creator and she is a nurturer. Everything that you associate with the feminine energy is defined by the cow. And here I am, I turned the cow into her masculine energy, charging me and hitting me so that I would slow down. Because basically what resulted from that accident was me slowing down for the next 60 days before this digital inclusion project came and fell in my lap, basically, as if I was recharging my batteries. And then my spiritual advisor explained to me, you have been in combat mode since you've come on this ranch because of the various stuff that I've been dealing with. and you have been only channeling your masculine because you've had to defend yourself, you've had to stand up for yourself, you've had to do X, Y, and Z. So where was your feminine energy? You have been suppressing it, suppressing it, suppressing it. And so there's been no balance, even though you are in Sohum. And so she gave me a very humbling talk. And what it resulted in was me, the cow, basically did make me slow down and take stock and revisit what I was dealing with and the way I was going about it. And I had to grudgingly acknowledge the cow medicine. You know, if you read any Native American text by a shaman, all the animals have a symbology. And then you use the deer symbology. So if the deer are crossing your path, and I'm again going totally out in the left field for you out of the financial planning topic,
Good,
but it needs to be shared. Deers in many cultures, even in Buddhism, even if you look at all the monasteries, you always see a deer symbol. And in Native American culture, deers are the way to enter the light through your heart because they represent love and sacrifice and nurturing. And so when you're looking at animal medicine and animal messages, when certain animals cross your path and you are open to that teaching, you are crossing deers again and again because deers are teaching you to pace yourself. They're teaching you to slow down. Their only defense is running. They have no other way to defend themselves from predators.
Right.
And so if they run out of stamina, then they are basically the next meal. But they never lose their gentle nature and they never lose their ability to, whenever somebody sees a deer, you have a smile on your face because you don't associate violence or anything that is not gentle until when you look at a deer. And so Buddhism and all these cultures, deer is a symbol of love and harmony. And, you know, opening up your heart to the higher energy so that it lightens up every cell and chakra in your body, you know, and cleanses it out. And you're basically telling the universe that I release everything that no longer serves me from every aspect of my life. And there are 6 aspects that we're talking about. You're talking about physically, psychically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and astrally. And if you do the cycle, this daily cycle, you talked about your practices, and I'm giving a simple practice. You step out, and the first thing you do in your day is not pick up your coffee, not pick up your tea, just breathe and say, thank you, universe, for the gift of this new day when so many other people have not woken up to the gift of this new day. You know, we take our life for granted. We take our mortality for granted. We take our health for granted. And all this unconscious habitual behavior is what needs to stop. You need to stop dwelling in the past. You need to stop worrying about the future. You need to be in the present moment. And when you wake up consciously, you get up, get out of your room, step outside. Doesn't matter if you're surrounded by concrete. Just because you have concrete buildings around you doesn't mean the universe doesn't exist. The universe is beyond all of us. It's bigger than all of us. So the universe will find you if you just step out into your consciousness, look up at the sky, always face east when you're doing these kind of practices, because the east is where when we talk about the spirits of the 4 directions, you have the spirit of the east, the spirit of the south, the spirit of the west, and the spirit of the north. You always face east when you're doing any of these meditative practices, because that's where the energy is coming for to give you energy. And you may not understand it tangibly. You don't have to understand this overnight, but understand that there is something bigger than you that is driving all these processes, giving you these experiences, negative or positive. And when you give gratitude, which was the second thing that Tina pointed out, gratitude is a very, very positive emotion. It pretty much cushions you, blankets you, and heals you from any negative energy. When you come from a source of gratitude, you learn to be humble and you don't speak from a point of ego. All of us at some point have defended our ego. You need to let that stuff go and understand the bigger picture. So on a daily basis, if you thank the universe for the gift of the new day you have, doesn't matter the challenges it brings your way or the happy stuff it brings your way, that's your journey to learn and grow. That's all that it comes down to, you know? And so if you give thanks in the morning, and if you are feeling really low and you're not in a healthy mental space, take out a notebook, take out a piece of paper and rant and rave on that piece of paper. If somebody has done injustice to you, if you don't like your boss, if you don't like your parents and you're acting out, if you feel your children are testing you, if you feel you're in an abusive relationship, whether it's same sex or a different sex, write down the stuff that's pissing you off. I'm not going to mince words. I'm not somebody who's known to mince words. And vent it. Do not hold it inside. This is the second area of problem. You suppress your emotions because you are trying to be strong and you are misdirecting yourself in a way that you are doing a disservice to yourself. You cannot help other people if you're unable to help yourself, whether it's your child, whether it's a grandparent, whether it's a parent you're giving. You have no business trying to help other people when you're unable to help yourself. So before you try to be magnanimous and suddenly get motivated by our talk and want to do big things, first be kind to yourself. First be nice to yourself. First pamper yourself. Do me before you do others. Because if you don't empower yourself first, you have no business trying to empower other people. It's not in your karmic cycle. And I mean it from a very, very deep standpoint. I'm not just saying these words. I learned this from my advisors and guides, and I'm sharing some of these things so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have no business interfering in other people's lives if they haven't asked us for our help. Because you have no right to interfere in their karmic cycles, as the ancient sayings go. So if somebody is consciously asking you for help, then do the best you can as a good human being. Don't worry about religion, caste systems, social norms. Be you. You decide how you act on a given day, not the other people who are irritating you. You decide how you respond to a situation versus reacting to a situation. And at any given point, you decide how to center yourself by being in one with nature. And there are a bunch of websites that can guide your journey. There is Sadhguru, who so many people know, at innerengineering.com. There is Dr. Maya Tiwari for the women especially. If you go to wiseearth.com, the resources that will come your way, I mean, you have to be in a learning mode. Lessons are going to come to you not just in a career format or a personal challenge. Lessons are coming to you on any given day. But if you keep doing the same thing again and again, the lesson is going to keep repeating again and again because you haven't learned. So until you demonstrate learning, the cycle will keep repeating itself. And that is how you grow yourself. That was my long answer again to your short question, Tina.
That's great. That is great. So what's the best way for people to get in touch with you? You've given us so many gifts. It's beyond expectation.
You know, you can contact us through the websites because, as you know, I'm ADD. On an average day, I need multiple projects, hence all these different things that I do. And it keeps me going. So Sohum Financial Planning is my current practice. And I don't have a website for it, but Tina can share the information of how to email me or call me. Other than that, you can reach me through the sohumglobalfoundation.org website. Sohum is spelled as SOHUM. So sohumglobalfoundation.org. And you can see some of the stuff that we are doing. And the ranch where I host people, and we are having a lot of activity this year compared to last year, is the sohummountainranch.com. I am in the process of updating the website, but all my contact details are on either of these websites. And Tina, I am super humbled to have been invited on your podcast, by the way. And it's not just other people learning from each other. I am learning from you. So I wanted to give you a shout out first. Thank you so much for having me here.
Devika Kamboh, thank you so much for all of your wisdom and insights and sharing your story with us.
So Tina and I are going to end this podcast by saying Sohum 3 times as we inhale and exhale. because the whole reason that all my projects start with this name is because the moment you say the word Sohum, whether you realize it consciously or not, it automatically creates a positive sound energy through your body. So whenever people want to reach me and they're thinking about something positive, I wanted to give them a positive gift, even if they are not coming to me, if they can't make it here, or they're not working with me. So that was my little gift to everybody who comes in touch with me. So having said that, Tina and I will now go 3, 2, 1. Sohum. 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 Thank you.
You're listening to In the Suite, a podcast that shares amazing stories of women in business and the financial services and the wealth management industry. Our producers are Tina Powell and Kevin Hirshhorn. Our editor at large is Kevin Hirshhorn. Our content writers are Carmen Varner and Tina Powell. Our research and technical assistants are Rachel Powell, Sarah Smirker, and Kimmy Rice. In the Suite podcast is sponsored by C-Suite Social Media, a digital marketing and social media agency for C-Suite leaders and companies in finance and technology. You can visit csuitesocialmedia.com to learn more. And thank you so much for subscribing and listening to In the Suite podcast. We are so grateful to you. We've got listeners in 512 cities and 32 countries. This podcast was inspired and created for you ladies. So please let us know how you enjoyed this episode with the amazing Devika Kamboh, and share your thoughts on LinkedIn and Twitter, #InTheSuite. You can also connect with Devika on LinkedIn and Twitter. And please check out Sohum Mountain Ranch, www.sohummountainranch.com, and also follow them on Facebook at Sohum Mountain Ranch. And always, if you would like to share the name of a rock star woman in financial services we should interview in sometime in 2021, please send it to me at tina@csuitesocialmedia.com. Again, thank you so much for listening and subscribing to In the Suite.